If you found this podcast, chances are you're a high achiever and you're successful. But now you're stuck and stressed, and you realize that everything you've created hasn't given you the fulfillment and the joy you thought it would. This is where we discuss the keys of high performance mindset and stepping into the next best version of yourself. Welcome to the Positive Persistence Podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Positive Persistence Podcast. Today we are joined by a man with an incredible story of hope, resilience, and faith over fear. Dusty Mysen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ian. Happy to be here.
Dusty, you and I had a chance to talk before we hopped on this recording, and wow, I mean the story that you told me, I can't wait for you to share with our viewers and our listeners, because it is nothing short of jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring, inspirational, motivational, all the things. So without further ado, let's get into the story of how you fought and survived your battle with pancreatic cancer, which I'm going to just drop a little plug here, is the title of Dusty's book, A Cancer Warrior, How I Fought and Survived My Battle with Pancreatic Cancer. But Dusty, if you can give us just a little background of kind of your life pre-diagnosis, and then kind of just go into your story. And viewers, listeners, you are going to want to listen in deep on this one.
Yeah. I mean, that was the turning point in my life. But prior to that, actually, I had never really had one of those earthquake moments, I had struggles, minor struggles, like everyone does, but never that earthquake, rock you, change everything. I grew up in Muskegon, Michigan, close to the shores of Lake Michigan, beautiful over there, with my parents, Dan and Cindy. They were, amazing parents. I had a great brother, Ryan, who, we grew up really close. We played all the sports, did all the things, completely blessed. I graduated high school from there, and I went to Michigan State University, met even more great people who blessed my life. I have a text string that's been going on for 30 years with my college roommates. They're like my closest brothers. And, so I went through 4 years of school with them and graduated with a degree in electrical engineering, jumped into a career in the automotive industry, which has gone great. At 28, I met the love of my life, my wife, Katie, and we started our family. We have 4 kids. Tristan, my oldest, is 25, and then Landon is 19. Parker, my only daughter, is 16. And then we have Grady, who's 12. So, great kids, do all the things, play the sports, and we kind of chase them around doing all that. So, I mean, like I said, completely blessed. I couldn't have asked for anything better. And then in 2020, I had this earthquake moment. Early in 2020, we all encountered COVID and started dealing with the changes that threw into our lives. I've always been a glass half full kind of guy, so I took that as an opportunity. My commute's pretty significant, so I saved that time. I started working from home, had a little more free time. I've always worked out, but I was like, I have extra time, so I got into the gym and really started getting after it in early 2020. But then in spring of 2020, I started having some abdominal pain. I completely thought it was from working out. I thought I pulled a muscle. I was 46 at the time. I'm like, I'm getting a little older. I get injured a little quicker. So I kind of tried to grind through it and work through it and do that thing. But by summer,
Most guys do, right?
Yeah, that's what guys do. Yeah. So by summer, it just wasn't getting better. So I finally went to saw my doctor, and he expected my gallbladder failed. So that ultimately ended up being a blessing. They did a bunch of tests, found out that my gallbladder was indeed non-functional. So we scheduled laparoscopic surgery to remove it. No big deal. And the surgery went as planned. After the surgery, the surgeon told me, you'll be better in a few weeks, back in the gym. Everything will be good. Unfortunately, I did not get better. It got worse. I got really sick. I was in significant pain. I couldn't sleep. It was just bad. And in early September, I woke up one morning and my wife looked at me and said I was jaundice. I was yellow. So we went to the ER and I ended up getting admitted, and they ran a bunch of tests. My liver was leaking bile. they thought it was from an issue with the surgery of my gallbladder. It was not. Ultimately, all of that was not the problem. It was a symptom. The tumor in my pancreas had blocked everything up that we didn't know was there. Again, I was fortunate. If my gallbladder wouldn't have failed, they would have not found the tumor probably in time. So September 22 of 2020,
So
I had a biopsy.
at this point, you're misdiagnosed.
I am misdiagnosed. Well,
Right.
correctly diagnosed in the fact that my gallbladder did indeed fail, but they thought that was the problem itself. It
Right.
was a symptom of pancreatic cancer, which we had no idea I had. And most people who are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, they don't realize it till too late because symptoms are rare. So I was fortunate enough to have that gallbladder issue. The scans they did, they saw something in my pancreas. They weren't sure what. They thought it was actually inflammation from the surgery, but they did a biopsy. And that was September 22nd of 2020. And that is how I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
So this all took place within a couple of months. Really?
Yeah, it was pretty much the from the beginning of 2020 through September of 2020. I was when I was diagnosed. And, you know, in hindsight, like so many things, in hindsight, it made sense. But going through it, I was a healthy 46-year-old, not your normal age or health for someone who's diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So we just didn't see it coming. There were no indications. Even my doctors didn't expect anything like that until we ultimately did that biopsy.
So when that news came back, what was your thought process? I know there's also a story in how you received the news, or the news was relayed to you. So if you can kind of tell us a little bit about that too.
Yeah. So how I received the news is an interesting part. Bedside manner should be a required course for surgeons, I've decided.
Right.
I woke up, again, I went into this biopsy assuming that it was going to come back non-cancerous. I still had, that was my belief up until the moment I went into the surgery. I thought I was too young. It didn't make sense that that's what it was. I, of course, had fear that that's what it could be, but I didn't expect it. So I woke up, I was still very groggy from the anesthesia, and I was in this dark post-op room. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was laying there and I could hear nurses in another room, but I was all alone. And out of nowhere, this biopsy surgeon is standing over top of me. And it's the first sentence of my book is the quote from him. He said, "Mr. Mysen, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but you have pancreatic cancer. I don't believe we can operate on it, and there's not much we can do." And with that, he pretty much walked away.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, and I was left there in my thoughts, and he had basically told me it was over. He met my wife, who was coming down from the waiting room to the post-op recovery room, and gave her the same news in very similar, unempathetic way. And then Katie and I, we really didn't talk. We just cried and hugged, and he basically told me to go home and get my affairs in order. And that's kind of where we were in that moment.
How old are your kids at this point?
They were, Tristan was late
5 years
20s.
ago?
Yeah, he was late 20s. He was away in college. Landon was in high school, Parker was in middle school, and then Grady was in elementary. So we have the full range of ages. So we received that diagnosis. I went to my lowest of low places. Again, it was still during COVID times, so Katie couldn't stay at the hospital. She was given the task of driving the hour home from Detroit to our Metro Detroit home to tell our kids the news.
Yeah.
And I do not envy her. I had to go to a hospital room. They admitted me. I was pretty sick and dehydrated, but I went there alone to sink into my thoughts, and she drove home to tell the kids. And it was probably my lowest of lows. It all alone in that hospital room. All I could picture was my own funeral. It was on a loop in my head, and I could just see my wife and kids grieving over my casket. And that was this, it doesn't get much more negative than that. And it was just looping in my head. So I kind of fought with myself a little bit, and Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 popped into my head. I did not grow up in the church. I'm not someone who can repeat scripture very well, but that verse popped into my head. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. And I don't know why it popped into my head, but it helped because I realized it's God's plan. It was out of my hands at this point. I've always been a person who's liked to control everything in his life. And that night, I realized that I no longer had the control.
Yeah.
And I just started repeating that, and I got the negative thoughts out of my head a little bit. I started repeating faith over fear over and over again in my head that night. And eventually, that very night, the first night after diagnosis, my mental state started to change from the lowest of low to slowly climbing out of that valley and getting into the fight.
Is there anything, I mean, you just kind of told us that your faith really helped you climb out of that hole. Is there anything else that helped you transition from this terrible news that you receive in the middle of your life, where one day you're expecting that, I've got the rest of my life to live. I just have this thing going on and they need to fix it or figure out what it is, to this pretty much life-ending diagnosis? What else was there that helped you really start to change your mindset, or as you put it, get into the fight?
Yeah, the first night, so that little faith over fear mantra helped, but I call it a miracle. It was the middle of the night, and I'm repeating these phrases in my head, and I'm staring at the white ceiling in that hospital room, laying in there by myself. And the night nurse came in to check my vitals, and I remember her again. I never saw her again, but I remember her like I can see her to this day. She was checking my vitals, and she looked at me and she said, "Mr. Mysen, are you a Christian?" And it caught me off guard. I had to like double take kind of. And I said, "Yes, I am." And she asked if she could pray over me. And again, I didn't grow up in the church. I've never had anyone pray over me, but it felt right. So I said, yes. And this little nurse put her hands on my abdomen where my pancreas is and started to pray. And she prayed for what felt like a half hour. It's been a few years, but I remember specifically, she kept praying, "By his stripes, you will be healed." She said that multiple times. And the prayer wasn't the key part for me. The part that really hit home with me was she believed what she was saying. She believed I was going to be healed. At that point, I was convinced I was a dead man walking. And this nurse who had never met me before had belief that I could survive this. And she had seen, I don't know how many cases of cancer like mine, yet she believed. And it clicked in my head that if someone I didn't know, who I'd only met for the first time, could have belief, then I should have that same belief. I should believe, and I should start to go. I never saw her again. My kids joke sometimes that she wasn't real, that she was my imagination or an angel or whatever. I never found her again. I was at the hospital multiple times, but it changed me. And people, I don't know, when I say that story, it's kind of hard to believe that you can go from the lowest of low to believing that you're going to survive in 12 hours, 24 hours, but that's really what happened. And I had many, many lows over the course of my battle with cancer. But from that first day, I kind of started to find that way out. And I realized really quickly that if you don't believe, you're going to go downhill in a hurry. You have to believe that you can do it, and you have to force yourself to stay positive. Your mentality sets the course for your physical well-being. And if you go to that negative place and stay there, and cancer is a nasty thing, it'll pull you there a little bit, but you got to claw your way out, because if you stay in that negative place, it can take you. So
it's time to ask yourself, when was the last time you prioritized you? Did you know that research shows that nearly 85% of high performers struggle to maintain a performance mindset while juggling the demands of work and personal life? Those who actively prioritize their performance mindset and personal growth are 30% more likely to achieve their goals in business and life. If you're feeling crippling stress and anxiety, or if you're feeling guilty when you take a moment for yourself, or if you're stuck in the grind and feeling burnt out, you're not alone. Many of us yearn for more, but struggle with the fear of being judged or feeling selfish. And you want to step into the next best version of yourself. That's why I created the Rinse Method, which got me from paraplegic to marathon runner. Backed by science-based proven strategies and now customized for high performers like you. If you're stuck, and stressed and want clear steps that you can implement today to move forward, make sure you visit thepositivepersistence.com to download our free rinse PDF. Well, let's talk a little bit about you battling back. So you've told us how cancer came along and kind of picked a fight with you. Let's talk about some of the strategies that you use to battle back and win.
Yeah, that's actually kind of how I ended up writing the book. I started journaling for the emotional relief of it. And I kept coming back to the same points in my journals, really, which ended up being these 6 points that I really leaned on daily. Every day I came back to them, and it's what helped me. I call it a fight. I call it a battle. And that's really what it is. I played sports growing up. Cancer was just another opponent. It was the hardest one I ever faced, but I really treated it like a fight. And the things that I kept coming back to were my faith, which I've talked about, positivity. When I started to get pulled down into a negative place, I had a few strategies I'd use. But one thing I did was I just made a post on Facebook saying, hey, I'm going to whip this thing. And people would respond with comments in that post. And it was a ripple effect. I would just put this little positive comment out there. A lot of times it was a forced positive comment because I wasn't feeling very positive. But
Yeah.
I would put it out there and people would come back with prayers and positive messages and whatever else. And it would pick me back up. And
Yeah.
it became part of my routine. Every day I would send something positive out and I would get way more back with that ripple effect. And then that would pick me up, which would take me to the next part of what became my strategy, which was my physical well-being. Early after my diagnosis, I read Stuart Scott's memoir, who was an ESPN sportscaster, and he died of abdominal cancer, I believe. I've read his book multiple times, but through all of his chemo, he worked out religiously. And when I was diagnosed, I just thought that was over for me. I don't know why. That was just what popped into my head. I read that book like in the first week and I was like, okay, I can get back in the gym. And I would get those positive messages from people. I would go down to my home gym and I would work out. And I was able to stay through all the chemo. The chemo I went through beat my body up pretty good, but I was able to stay in the gym and keep my body in fighting condition. And I think that was critical. So, and I tell people to this day, there were days where I'd do whatever, 5 miles, a 5-mile run during that. There were other days when I would walk to the neighbor's house and that was as far as I was going. There's a big range, but if you're going, I tell people who are going through cancer, whatever you can do in that day, if you can walk to the neighbor's house, that's what you do. If you can make it to the end of the block, that's what you do. And if you can run 5 miles, that's what you do.
Yeah.
So I really jumped into the physical side of it. And then that kind of rotated, that kind of pulled everything else back up. And then I also just kept a focus on my family. That's what I was fighting for. And I thought about them each and every day. And Grady, my youngest, was in 3rd grade, maybe still in elementary, young. There were a lot of things that I didn't want to miss with all of my kids. And I wanted to do everything in my power. And then if my time came, that was going to be fine.
Yeah.
But for as long as I was here, I was going to fight. I was going to fight the cancer every single day and do it so that I could spend more time with them and give it everything I had. And that's all I could do. So that's kind of the path to follow.
That's the thought process of there is only one option for me, and that is to fight, because there's too much to lose if I don't.
Yeah.
And I want to just kind of spin back here, just off the beaten path, just for a second, and we'll come back to this. But just a question: do you think, and of course you'll never know this, but do you feel at least that your physical fitness or level of physical fitness before the biopsy and the diagnosis actually helped you fight and recover?
I definitely do. I was about 170 pounds, but very fit when I was diagnosed. At the worst of it, my lowest was 127 pounds. And I looked sickly, but I kept fighting through it. And I've thought many times, if I wasn't fit when I started and it did that much damage to my body when I was fit, I don't know if I would have been able to get through it.
Right.
It's a strain on the body. Your body, it takes everything within your body to fight the disease, and your body needs to be in a good condition to do that. So yeah, I think where I started was key, and then continuing through my treatments and my fight kept it as strong as possible. It wasn't where I wanted it to be for sure, but it kept it enough where it really allowed me to fight and keep going, and really just stay alive long enough to get to a surgery that could remove the cancer.
Okay. So that kind of brings us back onto the story of your recovery, Dusty. And before we get into that, just I'm curious on the days where you could only make it to your neighbor's house,
Mhm.
and that was as much energy as your body allowed you to have. What did you do, or what did you tell yourself, or what were some of the things that you were able to either think of or put yourself through to help you make it through that day and actually look forward to the next one as like another opportunity to fight?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We all get caught in the moment, right? We're in the when you're in the depths of it, it's hard to see past that. But I tried to find little things, just little things, right? Like
Mhm.
I write, and one of the things I wrote in the book is I don't know of too many people who've patted themselves on the back for being able to walk up a flight of stairs and tuck their kid in at night. I had days where I could not get out of my recliner. Like the chemo just had me like wasted.
Yeah.
But going up and tucking my son in at night was important to me. And man, it took every bit of energy I had. But I hiked up those stairs, gave him a kiss goodnight, and tucked him in. And then I think the important part, or part of the important part of that, is then I kind of gave myself a pat on the back for accomplishing that. On a normal day, that is not a significant accomplishment. But on a bad day, you got to take what you can get. And that
Yeah.
those little things, I would take those little wins. Little wins add up
Yes.
to big wins, but you got to take them
Yes.
all. And I would take those little wins when I could get them. And I remember laughing one night. And I was like, I actually patted myself on the back. I went up, tucked him in, and I was like, "Good job." And I kind of laugh about it, but it's those little wins that you can stack when things are bad. Just stack the little ones
Yep.
till you get to a big one.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is so critical, I think, just in every ordinary day life for us to remember to stack those small wins. If we're not paying attention to stack them into big ones, but at least to stack them so when we need them, they're there. So we can kind of lean back on them and say, I've got a couple of these small wins in the bag that I can pat myself on the back and feel good and lift myself up.
Yeah,
So here you are now going, you're working out, you're doing all the things that you can, and you're in recovery mode. But at this point now in your journey, you still have cancer.
yeah,
So
yeah.
what's next? What's happening now in
So
your story?
yeah, so within 6 months, I had an opportunity for a surgery. It's called a Whipple procedure. So I'm going to take a step back. The statistics for pancreatic cancer are really not fun, but I'll go over them a little. The 5-year survival rate when I was diagnosed was 11%. 11% of people make it 5 years. It's ticked
Wow.
up to 12% now, which we'll take every percentage point we can get for all
Okay.
my fellow warriors. But
Yeah.
80% of people die in the first year. And when I was diagnosed, that surgeon said, there's nothing we can do. And we expected me not to make it that first year. But within 6 months,
Yeah.
roughly 20% of people can have, who are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, are eligible for a Whipple procedure where they cut part of your pancreas and stomach and intestines out and remove the tumor. I was low probability for that, but after about 6 months, the chemo was working fairly well. The tumor shrunk, and they thought they
But
might be able to.
just so I'm clear, 11%, now up to 12%
Yeah.
of individuals that are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer will survive past a year
We'll survive to 5 years. Yeah.
to
20,
years.
20%, roughly 20% make it 1 year.
20% make it 1 year. and then there is a window in where you're able to have this Whipple procedure. And that
Yeah.
window is how long?
It depends on the case. So if it's spread to other organs, which is stage 4, it's the procedure is not an option until they isolate it back to the pancreas. Potentially, usually once it's spread, unfortunately, the odds are not as good. You can get there. So if it's isolated just to the pancreas, which mine is, and they can get to it and get it out, you can be eligible for this procedure. It's really it's the cure. It's the one cure, at least for the interim. So with me, my tumor was stuck to the main artery that feeds your intestines. So they wouldn't do the surgery right away. But after about 4 to 6 months, they thought it had shrunk enough it may have come off the artery. So it's a pretty major procedure. They tried it in 2021, and the surgeon got in there and it was still stuck to that artery. So he said he could not do it. He closed me back up. That surgeon actually told me, this is a one and done opportunity. I will never try it again. I do not recommend anyone else ever tries it again. And he recommended that I go through more chemotherapy and try to extend life. So second surgeon within 6 months to tell me to go home and get my affairs in order. I didn't really.
Yeah, so I can imagine the emotional roller coaster that you were on going in. I would imagine hopeful that this surgery is actually going to cure you. And then you wake up post-op and he says, couldn't do it, can't do it. I don't think anybody should try. So again, you've been handed a death certificate, basically.
Yeah. And with the biopsy, again, I went down pretty low and I came out. When I came after the surgery, I kind of built the tools to know how to fight, to battle. So I jumped right back in. I was supposed to be in the hospital for 10 days post-op. I was out in 4. I was walking a mile within a week and a half, I think. I started working out immediately, and I started chemo again and radiation. And I basically told my oncologist, give me whatever you can give me. The hardest stuff you have, I want to keep the tumors. I want to shrink the tumor and I want to keep it from spreading. And I'll keep working out and let's keep me alive as long as possible. And maybe we'll have a medical miracle and something comes along that we can do. I'm just going to keep in the fight. And that's what I did for approximately 2 years after many, many rounds of chemo, radiation, different types. But through all of it, I lived a pretty normal life. I still went to all my kids' sporting events. I still worked full time. I still worked out regularly. I still hung out with my family and friends. I just had a little annoyance that I had to go to chemo regularly. And a few years after that failed surgery, the tumor continued to stay small, shrink a little bit. I found another surgeon. His name's Dr. David Kwan. He's here in the Metro Detroit area. And I set up an appointment and said, look, no one else will do this. Will you do it? Will you try a second Whipple on me? And he said, the odds aren't good. There's significant complications because you've been through it once. There's a lot of scar tissue in there. I give it less than 50%. And it's high risk surgery. If you really want to do it, if you're in, I'm in. And he said, but I want you to go home and think about it because it's a major risk surgery. So I did. And at the time, I think I was 49 and it's pretty young. And I wasn't ready to throw in the towel and I could keep fighting with chemo, but eventually the cancer would have spread and that would have been the end of it. So I told him I wanted to proceed with the procedure. He had no doubts. He's a very confident man and has a never say never attitude, much like myself, unlike the first surgeon. And he was willing to try. He didn't promise anything, but he was willing to try. So that surgery was in late 2022. I prepared for it like I was preparing for a heavyweight fight. I worked out harder than ever. I got mentally ready. I got spiritually ready. And then I really handed it to him. Once we got to the surgery, my job was just to take a really long nap and let him do his thing. But that surgery was 13 and a half hours. And Yeah, 13 and a
Wow.
half hours. And I woke up, obviously very groggy from a lot of anesthesia. And
Mhm.
Katie was standing there and told me he was successful. So yeah, it took me days to really believe it. It was such a shock. I couldn't believe it, but he was able to remove the tumor completely and then remove the lymph nodes that were around and make sure that they were clean. Everything was clear. And yeah, I'm going on 28 months cancer free now since that point. And I
That's
go back for regular scans. Everything's great. But yeah, a surgeon's willingness to just try something that was pretty high risk. And all I did was is be willing to take that chance. But between the two of us, him primarily with some significant help from God, he was able to remove the tumor, and I'm sitting here cancer free.
that is amazing, Dusty. That is the epitome of positive persistence. All the things that you did in between your first surgery, the biopsy, and the second surgery, and just, I'm not giving up. I'm going to do everything in my power to fight this thing. That is amazing. And I applaud you for having that mindset and that tenacity, because there's a lot of people out there that don't. And there's also a lot of people out there that would have gotten that news and just given up and would have said, okay, well, I guess this is my lot in life. Woe is me, basically. But
Yeah.
you went the other route and you decided that, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. So I'm going to do everything that I can to fight cancer. And you're sitting here telling the story as a victor, as a winner. That is, it's just amazing to me that, and here's a question for you. Okay. So you've just said, you've kind of given the doctor a lot of props, obviously he has his medical expertise and skill, but without your preparation, mentally, physically, spiritually, as you put it, do you feel that the outcome would have been the same where you are currently today?
And it's interesting because with all of those things, I'm still going to give him the credit. He's the guy who was in there for 13 and a half hours doing his thing. But with
Sure.
all those things, I don't know if you get to that point. I that persistence, and that's why I love the name of your podcast. It's the way we should all live, but until you're thrown into that moment, I don't think people always realize it. But I don't think I would have ever got to the point where I would have even found him, asked for a second surgery, kept my body in the condition to go through that surgery, been able to recover from that surgery so quickly. So that's the part I did. He obviously did the hard part, but I think people, I don't want to say give up too quickly, but it's hard to keep hope. There's so many examples in our world of negative things. We're
Yeah.
surrounded by them. Turn on the news. It's negative things everywhere, and you can
Mhm.
let that overtake you. And a surgeon telling me no one should ever be able to, I tried, it didn't work, no one else should ever try. I could have just accepted that.
Right.
That's not something I wanted to accept. And I think you can get pulled into that negative too much. I always tell people, find the positive, find the hope. No matter your situation, I mean, no matter how bad it is, there's
Yeah.
always a little bit of hope. And if you can find that and grab onto it, that can pull you out of some pretty dark places.
Yeah. I love that. I like to say myself that, even on cloudy days, you can find that silver lining. Sometimes you have to squint to find it, but it's there.
It's
And
always,
like you said, if you can hold on to that and build from that, that can be a game changer. It can be a lifesaver in your case. And I just, again, I applaud you for like your mental toughness, your mental fortitude, your tenacity, your ability and willingness to decide in advance that the news that you got from that doctor was not for you. Like, you did not identify with that. You did not let his perception of what your capability was going to be become your reality. You had other plans. And, the credit, yes, the doctor did this thing, but without you putting yourself in that position, like you just said, it would have probably been a different case altogether.
Yeah, for sure.
And,
I mean, the statistics, like I said, the statistics aren't good.
right.
And some people, I've met a lot of people who've gone through similar cancer struggles, and I have a few who were close to me that we lost, unfortunately. I have a good friend, Scott, who we lost very recently, and he was diagnosed stage 4, but it was amazing to watch him. We got to know each other fairly well, and he fought right up till the end with a smile on his face and a positive attitude, and it was unfortunately just his time. But
Yeah.
watching the way he went through it, so it kind of made me realize, seeing that the end result is less important than the journey itself, and how you handle that journey. The way he went through it was with strength and a positive attitude and a love for his family, very
Yeah.
similar to where my focus was. He just, wasn't as fortunate on the backside. I don't understand why, but I think that how you go through the journey is the important part, and that's one of the things I've learned from it. And try to pass on to other people. Like, stay in it, stay in the fight, enjoy the journey as you go through it. None of us are promised tomorrow, and if you do that, you're going to end up living a pretty good life for however much time you're lucky enough to have.
Yeah. Man, Dusty, so many pearls of wisdom that you have given us today. And I know that there's so many more in your journey, in your story, in your book. So can you tell our listeners and our viewers where they can find that?
Yeah. So my book is A Cancer Warrior: How I Fought and Survived My Battle with Pancreatic Cancer.
Mhm.
My name's Dusty Mysen. You can search on Amazon for that, but the book is on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, pretty much anywhere you can find your books. But yeah, I think you'll enjoy the read. Again, my only goal with writing the book is to give a little hope for people going through their own challenges, whether that's an illness like cancer or any other struggle we face day to day. I think it's a little eye-opening to I think it's a good read from the fact that it can give hope based only on the fact that I made it through. If I made it, you can make it, and we all can make it. So yeah, I suggest people go out, grab it, and enjoy the read.
Dusty, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story, because for those of us who may be in that dark spot or in that dark place and are doubting the future, the more people like you that tell their story, the more people can see actually what's possible, and just the thought of, entering that realm of possibility can be an enlightening endeavor. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to thank all of our viewers and our listeners for tuning in. And man, there is no better way to show you guys and let you guys listen to the epitome of positive persistence in Dusty's story. So as we always ended up, remember, mindset is everything, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in and being part of the Positive Persistence family. We're having a great time creating this content, and we truly hope it inspires you to embrace positivity and persistence in your own journey. If this podcast episode inspired you or entertained you, scroll down, hit those stars, and leave a comment or two. Your 5-star reviews and shares encourage us and help us grow the show. So until next time, stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything.